Coming up on episode 95 of Creative Writing, I'm talking about best practices and when to break the rules.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost light. These restless thoughts have kept me up again tonight.
Hey there, and welcome to Creative Writing. This is the podcast for writers, bloggers, and creatives who want to build an online platform without being smarmy. I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant, and I am so very glad that you're here, whether this is your first or 95th time listening to the podcast. Welcome. So before we get into the best practices and when to break the rules, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Ambition Ally. And they're the makers of Pop-Up Ally Pro. And I've talked about this. I'm going to be talking about this for the next 6 weeks or so because they've sponsored us for a while. But this is something I love talking about because I actually use it on my site. Now, if you go look now, you may not see the pop-ups that I'm using from Pop-Up Ally Pro. And that is because you can actually use a feature called Smart Subscriber. And what that does basically is you can set it up so that if someone is already subscribed to your email list, they are not going to see the pop-up. I know, crazy, right? So that's just one of the cool features, and it's really easy to set up because they actually have a whole video library showing you how to set up the different opt-ins on your site. So if you're looking for a pop-up and you want one that's smart, that's not going to drive your readers crazy, look no further than Pop-Up Ally Pro, and you can go to ambitionally.com/Kirsten to learn more. So please do that. A big thank you to our sponsor, and I hope you guys show them some love. I'm really appreciative of them sponsoring the show. Now, let's talk best practices and rules and when to break them. So the reason that I kind of thought about this was from some of the conversations we've been having in the Facebook community. And if you're not there already, you need to be. So you can just go to creativewriting.com/community. That will take you right to the Facebook group where you can ask to join. Now, I mentioned this before, I think in the quick fix, but a bunch of people actually had tagged me in the news article, if you saw it, about the court case that was decided over the Oxford comma. And if you're not sure about the Oxford comma, it's basically like when you have three things in a series, like apples, oranges, and bananas, and you use a comma before the and. So apples, comma, oranges, comma, and bananas. So the Oxford comma is, well, I guess some people use it and some people don't, because the reality is a lot of the things that we consider rules are often actually best practices, despite what your grammar teacher has taught you about them. And they're also always changing. And so that is something that's interesting to consider. So people sent that to me, and that kind of got me thinking, because we were talking about in the group, and some people use the Oxford comma and some people don't. No judgment, but you should use the Oxford comma. There's a lot of really great memes about that on the internet. But the other thing was, and again, these are going to all seem unrelated, and then I'm going to bring it all together. I had an email from one of my students in Own Your List, which is my email course, and she was saying that for her, content upgrades, which is where you have a freebie that's tied to like a particular post where people can download the checklist to do, XYZ that you talked about in your post if they give you their email address. And she said that those made her feel gross. And she felt like for her, it was getting dead subscribers on her list who just wanted something free. But then also she just didn't like how it made her feel. And so this kind of got me thinking, because she was saying, everybody says I should do this, so I feel crazy for thinking that I shouldn't do it, because this is like kind of one of the number one ways people say you should grow your list. The last thing was something that we talked about in the group, and we've talked about this before in our Facebook community, and it's something that gets everybody talking, is whether you should have 1 or 2 spaces after a period. And this one, even though, again, like I mentioned, there's sort of best practices, not really rules, the 2 spaces after a period came about because of typewriting and the way that typeset actually worked, that it needed to have that to be legible. And there's a whole long story beside that. I'll link to something in the show notes, which you can find at creativewriting.com/095. But overall, that was something that was used with the typewriter, should have died out, but not everybody got the memo. And I was one of those people who never got the memo. Even when I went to grad school, nobody corrected me for using 2 spaces. And it took typing in 9th grade, which was like 1992. So I never learned you shouldn't do this, and then finally learned, and it was like I really dug in my heels and didn't want to change. But if you are trying to get something published it matters if you have two spaces. It just makes you look dumb. And so anyway, we've had some discussions about that in the group. So all of these things together all kind of fell under this umbrella to me, where I wanted to talk about the idea of rules and the idea of best practices, and then what you should do for yourself and your business. Here's the thing. It's really important to know the rules. You should always know the rules of something. You should know, and rules maybe is not a hard and fast term. It's more of a loose term, because grammar rules, again, I think a lot of times they're shifting and changing, and the British English versus the American English is really not the same in some of the rules. So, again, take it with a grain of salt, but it's important to know what is expected of you. And then to think about, am I breaking this rule with a purpose is really the main thing. Am I breaking this rule with a purpose? And also, can I break this rule without seeming dumb? So let's talk about some of the examples that I mentioned in kind of the intro where I was setting this whole thing up. So in terms of the double space after the period, here's one of the ones where I want to say, just don't. Unless you're just writing in, on a blog that you don't, you're not intending to ever publish anything. You don't care who reads it. You're not intending to get a book for sale, because the reality is, because it's a best practice to only use one space, it really drives editors and publishers and other people nuts. And what it does is it makes you look uneducated. So even if you're using it with a purpose and your purpose is like, I just like it, that's not enough reason to override the way that people will judge you for using a double space, because it makes you look ignorant. It makes you look like you don't know the rules. It doesn't make you look like you're intentionally breaking them because you just don't care and you like those two spaces. It makes you look like you don't know. And you don't want to look like that, especially if you're trying to get something published. Okay, so then the next example is I want to talk about my Own Your List student who didn't want to do content upgrades. At least not in the sense where you had to sign up with your email address to get them. And I totally understand that. And she used an example of Regina from By Regina, who I love. And a lot of her things are free. You don't have to give your email to get them. And she said that for her, it just made her feel gross. She felt like it was weighting her list down. And so I told her, don't do that then. Don't do content upgrades. Just have a link for people to download and then put a little blurb by there saying, hey, if you like my content, sign up for my email address. Put it there, but don't make them do it if that makes you feel bad about it. So she knows the best practices, and the best practices are that content upgrades really do work. And if you go to basically any email training now from anybody, they're going to tell you about content upgrades and how important they are to grow your list. But that doesn't matter if it doesn't feel right to you. And that's a different kind of choice. And I hope you can see how it's different. It doesn't make you look uneducated to not give a content upgrade. It makes you look like it's important to you not to ask for an email address. It makes it look like it's valuable to you to give that away really for 100% free, not even for the cost of your email address. And probably that student is going to get some more signups from people who really resonate with that idea of not having to do it, of making it voluntary, just as she resonated with someone who gave a lot of things away for free. So she's going to be attracting those ideal people and the ideal audience members who resonate with that idea of not making somebody sign up. Now, as a side note, and kind of in defense of content upgrades, I think it's totally reasonable for you to do free content that you quote unquote, I guess, sell or give in exchange for an email address, because it's a lot of hard work that goes into it. But I also think if you feel gross about it, you should not do it. So I do not feel like content upgrades are smarmy, but if you feel like they are, don't do them. Okay. Go with your gut. So this brings us back to kind of this main idea, like you need to know the best practices. It's important to know the rules. And then it's okay to break them if it's really important to you. And you have to, again, ask yourself, is this a hill I want to die on? Do I want to die on that double space after a period, even though it's going to make me look dumb when I'm trying to get a book traditionally published? I mean, okay, it's your choice, but the reality is publishers are looking for any excuse to not read something that comes over the transom or something that comes to an agent. Same thing. They're going to read a page of your manuscript. If they really love it, they'll read more. But if you have double spaces, that's enough reason for them to stop. So to me, I'm like, you guys, don't choose that hill, okay? Don't choose that hill to die on. But if you don't want to ask for an email address and give content upgrades for free and then invite people to sign up for your list, go after it. That's a great thing. That's totally okay. So I think it's really important that you know the best practices, that you know the quote unquote rules, that you have some sense and idea of what people kind of expect and should do, so that if you break those and go your own way, that it's done intentionally and that it seems intentional, because that's the other thing. Double spaces after a period, again, keep going back to this, but they don't seem intentional. It seems like you don't know. It immediately kind of places you as somebody who took typing in the 90s, in the early 90s even. And so is that what you want? Do you want to be presented as somebody who took typing in the early 90s? I don't know. You have to choose this. If you want to die on that hill, you guys go ahead. But I just want to give you the sort of understanding that you need to think about how it makes you seem to other people, and you want it to seem intentional. And then you just go with your gut. You just go on with your gut and you say, this is how I feel. This is what I want to go with. And I'm going to break this rule. I know the rule. I know the best practice, but I'm going to break it anyway. And that's okay, because sometimes some really amazing things come out of that. And when people know, especially if you're upfront about saying like, hey, this is me going against the grain, I think you win the respect of the people who are your ideal readers. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. Know the rules, know the best practices, and then break them where it makes sense and where it's really worth it. Decide if that's a hill you want to die on, and consider being really upfront with your people about the fact that, hey, I know this is how other people are doing it, and no judgment to them, but I'm doing it this way instead. Because I think that shows a real integrity. And again, it will attract your ideal readers. So we're going to end there. And if you want to find the show notes for this episode, where I link to some of the conversations and the articles and posts that we were talking about in our Facebook group, then you can go to creativewriting.com/095. And you can also join the conversation where we talk about double spaces after periods with vehemence and passion. Then you can go to creativewriting.com/community. And again, thank you to our sponsor, Ambition Ally. And I would love for you guys to go check them out, not just because they're sponsoring the show, although I'm super thankful they are, but because I'm a user. I have been a user for over a year now, I think, and have really enjoyed and seen some great things. I love how customizable it is, and I love that I don't have to annoy subscribers who have already signed up for my email list. So head over to ambitionally.com/Kirsten. That's it, you guys. That's all I've got for you today. Again, I'm doing some short episodes because I'm doing a lot of recordings for the Profitable Blogging Summit, which I cannot wait to bring you. And if you're signed up for my email list, then you already have heard about this. But if not, you can go to creativewriting.com/PBS17 for the Profitable Blogging Summit 17. And if you're not signed up for my email list, you're really missing out. So that is at creativewriting.com/quick fix. As a reminder, I'm doing a contest for reviewers, and I've gotten more reviewers, but you guys are not sending me screenshots of your reviews. And I really I'm not going to go into iTunes and have to track everybody down, because some of you have crazy names on there that don't relate to anybody I know. So you need to send me a screenshot of your review, and I will enter you in to win entrance into all of my existing courses and win copies of all my books. So come on, you guys, leave a rating or review on iTunes and then send me a screenshot. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an inspired week.